Should the Royals start playing Freddy Fermin every single day? We'll give you our thoughts next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find us on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's my personal account over on Twitter. You also can find us wherever you get your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast. We're on Odyssey, and we're on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you are a first-time listener and you want to know a little bit more about me and this show, well, I am based here in Kansas City. I work at Sports Radio 810 WHB, doing some hosting, co-hosting, and some producing. But when it comes to this podcast, when you click on this link, you know that you're going to be getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. Now, today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off on your first purchase. And again, those terms will apply. The Royals dominated in Game 1 tonight against the Detroit Tigers. It wasn't really a high-stress game. At no point was it really close. I mean, you could say the two runs were close, but with the Tigers starter on the mound and Seth Lugo, it just didn't feel like that was going to be a recipe for a comeback if you were a Tigers fan. The Royals were up 3-0, 3 batters into the game. I mean, there just never really felt like a point in the game that Kansas City was in trouble. And they get 2 home runs from Vinnie Pasquantino. We'll talk about him in the final segment tonight. They get another home run and an RBI double from Bobby Witt Jr. He's hitting .350 as of August 1st, though maybe when you listen to this podcast, it'll be the early morning hours of August 2nd. They had a fantastic outing from Seth Lugo, a good outing from Will Smith in the 9th. They didn't have to use their bullpen at all, really, just 1 inning from Will Smith, but 8 innings of 1-run ball from Seth Lugo, about as good as it can look in Game 1. And if I'm not mistaken, that is 4 consecutive wins on right now in their current stretch of the schedule, but also 4 consecutive wins against the Detroit Tigers, because I believe the last time they had played, it was in mid-May, and it was a sweep for the Royals. So carrying that trend, the Tigers are incredibly banged up. Tomorrow they're going to see Tarek Skubal, but we don't even know the starters for the final 2 games of the series, when it'll be Michael Lorenzen and Michael Wacha going for Kansas City. So a great opportunity to keep things going. They've jumped back into second place in the American League Central and the second wild card spot. Now 2.5 games up on the Boston Red Sox and a half game up on the Minnesota Twins. Still 6 games back of the Cleveland Guardians, who have suddenly caught fire again in the midst of their tough stretch. So not looking too likely that the Royals are going to catch them, but we all know just getting your foot in the door, that is the goal for this team in 2024. Again, we could spend a first 7 to 8 minutes talking about Bobby Witt Jr. and his unbelievable second half so far. We are going to talk about Vinny just a little bit later on in the show. We could talk about Seth Lugo, but I think we need to ask ourselves a question that has been brought up more than once. Mainly from you, the listeners. I'm not taking credit for this one because I had been asked this on a Mailbag Friday, which, by the way, that is going to be tomorrow. So send your questions or respond to this video with the questions you may have. I'll try my best to get to them, as long as we don't have 40 like we did last time, and I'm just not going to be able to answer all the questions. Is Freddy Fermin an everyday player? I think that is a question a lot of people have been asking, and I would say that 90% of those asking believe he should be an everyday player. And it's tough in baseball to make even obvious decisions, right? We always think it's black and white. Oh, this guy is hitting well, make him a starter. Oh, this guy isn't pitching well or isn't playing well or is struggling in the bullpen, just move him out of that spot. We always think it's that simple when we're being the couch managers. I have been a couch manager many a times when watching baseball. I've been a couch coach before and watching football and watching basketball. But I would even say that I don't always know what I'm talking about. I would make the wrong decisions a handful of times. And with Freddy Fermin, even though it sounds simple, it sounds obvious to just put him in the lineup every single day. I'm sure Matt Quatrero, Paul Hoover, Alex Zumwalt, Keone Duren, all of the guys. I'm trying to think of one more guy that would maybe be helping out in the lineup situation here. Maybe you could throw Damon Hollins in there to try to orchestrate, this lineup and piece together what makes the most sense. And Matt Quatraro has not been shy in the past about mixing and matching different guys out there. I mean, if there's a lefty on the mound like Tarek Skubal tomorrow, I'd imagine there's going to be 8 righties in the lineup. Vinnie Pasquantino will be the only lefty in that lineup. So we'll see Garrett Hampson tomorrow. We might see Dairon Blanco, although with the addition of Paul DeJong, who I expect to play tomorrow, he might not put Dairon Blanco in the field. Freddy Fermin, I do believe will play tomorrow. And that is going to make it, what would it be, 3 straight days with him in the lineup? Maybe it would be 4 straight days. No, it is 3 straight days as a starter. And I think Freddy Fermin is a player you do have to handle delicately because he is your backup catcher. And because Salvador Perez is the catcher of this team, you could always DH Freddy Fermin, and I don't think you'd have too much of an issue with it. There are ways to get him in this lineup more than he has been playing. I mean, he is, if I'm not mistaken, second on the team in WAR, only behind Bobby Witt Jr. He's got more WAR now than Salvador Perez does. It's not to say that Freddy Fermin's a better player, that he should take the job from Salvi. I'm not saying that at all. But you could find a way to put him in the lineup every single night and not put him behind the plate, though he's great defensively. I mean, I've seen a lot of comments of, let's catch Freddy, and Salvi can DH. Get Salvi off his feet, give him more rest. And I have been a big supporter of that because I think Salvador Perez is at his best offensively when he's not catching 140, 145 games a year. However, there's also starters this year that have built up that relationship, built up that connection with Salvi and not Freddy Fermin. We've seen Freddy catch Brady Singer a lot. We've seen Freddy catch, multiple guys. I'm sure he's caught everybody. I'd have to go back and look at each start, but I'm sure he's caught everybody at some point in time. Whether that be in warm-ups as well, bullpen sessions, they are familiar with Freddy Fermin. Not going to call him a stranger, but, even Seth Lugo and Michael Wacha, when they came to Kansas City, said one of the main reasons was so that they could pitch to Salvador Perez. And Salvi still wants to catch. But I think this also goes to an offensive standpoint. Freddy Fermin's a good hitter. I mean, you can't deny it anymore. I think I was one of those people that believed he was a guy you don't want to overexpose, in which you play him every single day. Guys are going to be able to figure him out. But that was more so last year, and that was early on this year. He now has 140-ish games under his belt, and he's only gotten better. I mean, he was OPSing after his RBI single tonight over 800 on the year. I mean, there is serious value there, and especially when you have some guys play every single day that are not giving you what Freddy Fermin could. I mean, you could still run out MJ Melendez and Kyle Isbell and Hunter Renfroe as your outfield. You can put Garcia at third. You can put Bobby Witt Jr. at short. You can put Massey at second, Vinny at first, and catch Salvi and DH Freddy. You could do that. Or if you wanted to play Paul DeJong, DeJong plays third, Garcia plays second, Freddy catches or DH, and then Salvi just flip-flops with whatever Freddy Fermin's doing. I think there is a very realistic possibility now that Freddy can play more than what he's been playing. And if it doesn't work out, okay, it doesn't work out. But the guy, I don't think is just he's playing good because he only plays once to twice a week. I think we're past that point. He's got a hot zone. He's got a cold zone. He has enough at-bats last year and this year that pitchers know how to throw to him, and yet he's much better this year. I think it's worth a shot at this point. You are 12 games over 500. You are pushing for the playoffs. You need your best players in there every single night. And I believe at this point, Freddy Fermin's one of the better players on this roster. He's a great story. Usually your backup catcher doesn't have, the second best WAR on the team, but that's how good he is. And he's a great behind the plate defensively. He's got a good arm. I think he handles the pitchers well. He does not look overwhelmed in any sort of situation. I think it's worth a shot. Even if it's not everyday player, I've heard, lead him off. Right? He's got great numbers, by the way, leading off innings. I don't know if you've seen this before. He's hitting over 400 when leading off an inning in his career, not just this year. maybe he's the leadoff guy. I don't think the Royals will put him there. I think he fits in the 6 to 7 hole, maybe the 8 hole, depending on who's out there. Maikel Garcia seems to have slipped back up to that part of the order, and he's been hitting well since the beginning of July. So you have this great opportunity where the offense seems to be clicking, and I think this lineup would get an even bigger juice or even bigger jump, I should say, with putting Freddy Fermin in the lineup every single day. I think at least for the rest of this Detroit series, I want to see Freddy Fermin out there. You could have Freddy catch tomorrow, Salvi DH, and then on Saturday, it's Salvi catching for Lorenzen, Freddy DHs. Then on Sunday, it'll be back to Freddy catching Walker. I mean, maybe that's a way you do it. You just trade off every single day. If Salvi catches on Monday, Freddy's going to catch on Tuesday. It's something I'm sure they're considering, but at this point, with the way he's been hitting, I don't know why it's not worth a shot. I don't know. Maybe they do look at him as a guy that will get overexposed. I think it's worth a shot for the next 2 series just to see what Freddy Fermin can do for this team in a everyday spot in the lineup. Because right now he's cooking. I mean, Freddy Fermin is having a tremendous year, and maybe the best is yet to come because he's been damn good this year for the Royals behind the plate and also in the lineup. Okay, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, I think there was some concern about the Royals just being really good against the White Sox and 500 against the rest of baseball. But I'm going to tell you why it's not as big of a deal as you may think it is. We'll dive into that next on Locked On Royals. You are tuning to Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Have a few sponsors I want to give a shout out to, starting with Liquid IV. And I'm somebody that I think, can drink a lot of water. Right now, it is unbelievably hot in Kansas City. It's hot all over the country, it feels like, unless you are in San Francisco, where I was not too long ago, and it was a nice balmy 60 degrees, 65 degrees, wonderful weather. But even when I was down there, I drink a lot of water. I drink a lot of water every day at work. I just like to get the intake, the healthy intake that you should have. But if you're not somebody that drinks a lot of water, well, maybe just throw a Liquid IV in one of your waters, and that will keep you hydrated for the rest of the day. It is so helpful, whether you're not feeling well, you're feeling nauseous, or you just need that water intake. Use a Liquid IV, because no more thirsty summers when you indulge in hydration with Liquid IV. You can get 20% off on your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use code MLB at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code MLB at liquidiv.com. We also want to give a shout out to SupplyHouse.com. Get supplies from the site that's made from the skilled trades at SupplyHouse.com. SupplyHouse.com is the reliable way to order plumbing, h-vac, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining SupplyHouse.com's free Trade Master program. Every Trade Master gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at SupplyHouse.com and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at SupplyHouse.com. We touched on this a little bit yesterday in our episode about the Royals' dominance over the White Sox. And in the last 24 hours, I'd been getting comments from some of the fans or followers and listeners about that ridiculous stat of, and more so ridiculous about the Royals' record against the White Sox. Not a ridiculous stat because it is a meaningful stat. 12-1 against, I believe, the worst baseball team that's ever been assembled in the modern era. The Royals took care of business against a bad White Sox team. They won 12-13. Their only loss was game 2 of a doubleheader. They were 48-48 prior to tonight against the rest of Major League Baseball. Now they are 49-48, so they are still above 500, but you would maybe say that's not the best record. And there was concern of, well, you look at their schedule in August, they'll see Cleveland a few times, they'll see Minnesota a few times, they'll see Boston, they'll see Philadelphia, they'll see New York, they will see the Braves, they will see the Pirates. They will see, who else am I missing here? The Giants to close out the year as well. There's going to be tough teams on their schedule. But I also don't take that as them getting exposed. And the beauty of it, especially after tonight, is the Royals could go 500 the rest of the way and pretty easily get a playoff spot, in my opinion. Because after tonight, they're 61-49. If they go 26-26 in the final 52 games, they will have won 87 games. And I think that's good enough to at least get you the final wild card spot. With the way Boston's been playing, the inconsistency of Seattle and Houston, Tampa Bay, giving up on a lot of their guys. They got much better at the deadline, but they did trade away a lot of the guys that made them, a prominent team in the American League over the last handful of years, mainly their bullpen and some of their arms in their rotation. So Tampa Bay feels like a team that could catch fire, but they traded away a lot of consistent guys in their lineup. Isaac Paredes and Randy Arozarena, traded Zach Eflin, traded Jason Adam. I mean, they traded away some pieces and kind of took this as a not rebuilding year, but a reloading year. So you come down to Boston, Seattle, Houston, Kansas City, Minnesota for those final two wild card spots. If the Royals go 26-26, they're going to be fine. If the Royals had to go, what would it be, 30-22 the rest of the way, or 32-20, I think it would be time to panic a little bit, right? I think that's what Boston has to do. Boston has to play that well the rest of the way. The Royals really don't. And that's why I don't think it should be a panic mode of the tough schedule coming up. And if they win 3 of 4 against Detroit, okay, so let's say they win tomorrow. That puts them at 62-49. We'll say they lose Saturday. They'll leave the series at 63-50. All right, so at 63-50, 113, that would be 49 games left. I mean, think about what your record needs to be in the final 49 to 50 games when you're 13 games over 500. I think they can be fine in the long run as long as they can continue to pad that cushion. Beat up on the teams that you should be beating up on. They did it against the White Sox. They didn't do it against Chicago, but Chicago, I think, is a very scrappy and competitive 54-58 ball club. When they see the Angels in Kansas City, you have to take 2 of 3 or sweep them. When you see Boston, you got to take advantage of a situation like that because you're in Kansas City, need to push them further and further down the totem pole. Like if they can just play 500 ball, which brings me back to the point of them being 49-48 against the rest of baseball and 12-1 against Chicago. Well, they've already played 500 ball against the rest of baseball. So just continue that trend. Now, there's been times we've been frustrated about taking only 1 of 3 when you win game 1. As long as they don't implode and lose 6 in a row, 7 in a row, lose the majority of the games against Cleveland and Minnesota, I think they're going to have the upper hand. I think they're going to have the advantage when you look at the wild card race. Not really looking at the AL Central right now. If it gets down under 4 games, we can revisit that. But this is all about keeping Boston away, keeping Seattle away, keeping Houston away. And, whoever wins the AL West, obviously that takes one of those teams out of the picture. So maybe it's just Boston and the second place team in the AL West. And then, of course, Minnesota competing for a wild card spot as well. It's like a 4-team race right now. But if the Royals can really take care of business in this Detroit series, in a perfect world, you sweep them. I'm not going to go that far after one game because the Royals have won a lot of game ones and then struggled the rest of the series. But Detroit's really banged up. You can take advantage. You can pounce on that. And if you do, that would be an undefeated road trip. It'd be 7-0. You would at that point be 64-49, 15 games over 500. Remember when you were 15 games over 500 back in May? And at that point, you are 26 wins away from, would that be right? Yeah, 26 wins away from 90, getting to 90 wins. That might be just good enough to get you the second wild card spot. And that, to me, is the beauty of it all. Or if you just needed to get to 86, 87 wins, you could play sub-500 ball and still be all right. That's why I'm not overly concerned at this point, because the Royals can go 500 the rest of the way, which they've done against teams not named the Chicago White Sox, and be fine. get to 87, get to 88, get to 88 or 89 wins. And I think they got their foot in the door of October. That's at least my view right now. It can always change when teams get hot and all of a sudden it's 90 wins to be the final wild card team. But even last year, we didn't see that. We saw a Minnesota team actually win the AL Central with less than 90 wins, I think it was right around it. It's going to be much different this year. But that's my takeaway on it. Right now, it's not stressing me out too much because the Royals have played 500 ball, actually winning ball now. They're over 500 against the rest of baseball. You do that the rest of the way. You don't need to set the world on fire. I think you're going to be in playoff baseball. I think you're going to see playoff baseball again for the Kansas City Royals. And we're going to revisit that a few times over the next, week and a half, 2 weeks, 3 weeks as we get closer to September. But right now, they're 12 games over 500. You play 500 ball the rest of the way, I think you're going to be just fine. Okay, we're going to take our final break of the show. When we come back, we'll talk about Vinnie Pasquantino's hot stretch and how it's just been overshadowed by Bobby Witt Jr. But before that, I want to give a shout out to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. When we come back, let's talk about Vinny's hot stretch and if he can carry it toward the end of the season. That's all coming up next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Our last shout out goes to Game Time, and even though the Royals are out of town, they won't be returning until Monday when they take on the Boston Red Sox. You can start looking for tickets over at Game Time. I've always believed it's the best app to go and use when you are thinking about buying tickets, and that's where I buy all my tickets now. Going to a concert tomorrow night, you guessed it, I bought the tickets over at Game Time. And even when I'm out of town and I'm looking at concerts to go to, or you're looking to a ball game to go to, it doesn't have to just be baseball. It can be basketball, football. They're going to show you those great deals, the hottest deals, the cheapest deals, whether you're going by yourself, with a friend, with multiple people, girlfriend, boyfriend, family members, grandparents. Just go to Game Time because it's the best app to use when buying those tickets. So download the app and create an account and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off on your first purchase. Those terms apply. So again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Bobby Witt Jr. has been so good in the month of July, and then to kick off August, of course, he has a solo home run. Vinnie Pasquantino made it back-to-back, but he had the solo home run, and he had the RBI double to extend the lead even more. And you're kind of at a loss of words at this point with how good Bobby Witt Jr. has been. I mean, he's taking the league by storm. Everybody's talking about Bobby Witt Jr. Do I think he catches Aaron Judge? Remains to be seen. I mean, if Aaron Judge stays healthy, it's going to be pretty hard to do it. That sounds controversial coming from a Royals podcast. I'm just trying to be as unbiased as I can. I would love for Bobby to win it. I think he's going to have ridiculous numbers when it's all said and done. I mean, he's hitting 350 with an OPS over 1,000 on August 1st. That's just absurd because those are numbers you would expect maybe in April, the middle of April for somebody that was really hot. Right now, he's just carried an absolute scorched earth second half into August, and you hope he can carry it as long as he can. What's funny about it, though, is that Vinnie Pasquantino has, in my opinion, had his best stretch of the season. We're just not talking about it that much because of how good Bobby Witt Jr.'s been. And it is a huge, huge boost to this lineup. And you're seeing the tear that Bobby Witt Jr.'s been on kind of become this infectious disease in a good way to everybody else in the lineup. Hunter Renfroe hits well now. Now he's been doing it since May 1st. So maybe he started the whole damn trend. Salvador Perez getting a little bit hotter. Michael Garcia getting hotter. Vinnie Pasquantino getting hotter. Freddy Fermin getting hotter. And it's just going to carry its way down the lineup. And that's the beauty of having somebody on a stretch like Bobby Witt Jr., but we've got to give our flowers to what Vinnie Pasquantino's been doing. I mean, this is the Vinnie that we all thought he could be at the beginning of the year. Remember when I had that episode of predicting All-Stars. I even had a solo episode dedicated to Vinnie Pasquantino being an All-Star in 2024. It didn't happen. I can live with that. It can be on Cold Takes Exposed. But when you really break it down, when you look at what Vinny's done this year, I don't know how you can complain too much. I mean, he's 10 for his last 30. He's not walking as much as you would like him to. He's really just turned into more of a hitterish type of first baseman. He has 2 walks in his last 15 games, but he's hitting 344. He's hitting 336 over his last 30 games. And you go back to his really ice cold stretch that I think was at the tail end of June, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, he was down to 244 on actually July 20th. So he's raised his batting average 20 points here in just a few weeks. But I'm trying to go back to when he was really, really ice cold. Okay, so we'll go to June 24th. That's what I was remembering here. He was hitting 231, had an OBP of 312. And after tonight, he's now up to 264 with an OBP of 320. So his on-base percentage only jumped up 8 points, but his average is skyrocketing. And he's driven in 76 guys this year. 76 RBIs with 50, I'm already getting it wrong again, 52 games to go. 52 games to go, he's at 76 RBIs. If Vinnie Pasquantino finishes with 100-plus RBIs and he has 20-plus home runs, he's at 14 now after his 2 home run night, I think this is who you believe Vinnie Pasquantino is. I mean, truthfully, I think this is what he's going to be in his big league career. You would like to see the on-base numbers closer to what he gave you in his rookie season when it was at 383. But a lot of that, I thought, too, was the league not really figuring him out. Last year, only 61 games before the shoulder injury sidelined him the rest of the year. But 106 games this year. He's played in the majority of them. He hasn't had any setbacks. He's got 24 doubles this year, 14 bombs, 76 RBIs, only 56 strikeouts. So that's always been a consistent part of his game. He doesn't really strike out, but now he's hitting his hottest stretch of the season, I believe, at the perfect time. And in his career, I'm not a batting average is everything type guy, but he's a 268 hitter. He's hitting 264 this year. Like, that to me feels like what he's going to be the rest of the way. And no, the defense isn't spectacular, but also the expectation we put on Vinny when he came up in the big leagues was largely because of what he was doing at the minor league level. How good his approach was, how different it was from everybody else in Kansas City. But I think this is just fine. Yeah, you would like to maybe see a better on base from your 4-hole hitter. Still, I mean, a 764 OPS, Salvi's is at 801, and Salvi's hitting 278 this year. But the way your first 5 are hitting right now, Garcia's hitting much better. Bobby Witt Jr.'s not from this planet. Vinny's been on a tear. Salvi's in the 4-hole hitting near 280, and he's going to run into likely 25 to 30 home runs this year. He's at 19 right now. Salvador Perez is hitting 276 over his last 7, 274 over his last 30. Like, this is all seemingly coming together. Hunter Renfroe, another guy we're going to throw out there. In his last 7 games, he's hitting 346. His last 30 games, hitting 306. The first 5 in your order, and then if we can tie it back into the first segment we had, Freddy Fermin's been unbelievable for a long time now. He's hitting 319 in his last 30 games, 400 over his last 7. So to me, you could have 6 guys right there, all, right after each other, feeding off each other. And it's contagious, man. I think it's infectious the way this offense is playing right now. They got a lot of guys that are on a hot streak. Bobby Witt Jr. is going to steal the show, but don't count out Vinnie Pasquantino. He has had a damn good second half, and I do think he's going to get over 100 RBIs this season, only 24 away with 52 games to go. Well, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson, and you can always follow me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Before we say goodbye, thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. But for your second listen, enjoy the Locked On MLB podcast. Host Pat Sullivan, aka Sully, is here daily to provide national expertise with his trademark humor to help you get ready for the MLB playoffs here in the dog days of summer. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day on Locked On MLB. Available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Tomorrow, we're going to have a Mailbag Friday where we answer all the questions from the listeners. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.